Culture. This interpretation challenges the widely held notion that culture means the high arts, theater, literature, painting, that is exclusive and access to it is restricted, predominantly through education, and is diametrically opposed to business, urban growth, and individualism. For Williams, the idea that possessions of culture rested on the narrow assumption outlined above was absurd. This definition placed culture firmly within the realm of the bourgeois and out of the reach of the working classes. When people hear about the word culture, they immediately think about art, but it is more than art. Culture is basically the way of life, the way people dress, speak, sing, dance, and believe in is also part of the culture. Maybe art is just a plus point for the meaning, but it has broad interpretations that we should know and learn. I think that people from higher positions are responsible for the misleading definition of culture because they set it as a materialism and not more than that. An example of culture is attending mass. Majority of us Filipinos are Catholics, so we are basically used to it and we also practice it. Neoliberalism. The recent collapse of the global economy owing to, among other things, the absence of regulation of financial markets has further eroded the credibility of neoliberalism. Nevertheless, it continues to exercise a strong influence on our economists and economic managers. Despite its obvious shortcomings, it continues to be the default discourse in these circles. Having the ability to decide on the things that can be a benefit for themselves is good and bad. Good because it makes life easier and goals can be reached easily. Bad because it is taking advantage of the people who have no idea about the agenda. A person that never cares for others can cause harm and greed. I can say people that who are part of the high class started this because of their greed for power. Humans are very unpredictable and can be either your friend or enemy, but it's part of our lives and now, as a lot of people are normalizing this kind of action, which should never exist in the first place. An example of neoliberalism is ukay-ukay. The seller can decide how much is the price, not knowing the real value of the clothes.
So myth. Myth is referred to as science. Myth comes from our mental ability to perceive things. When we give meaning to a certain situation, that is where the concept of myth starts. This is also linked with semiotics. Semiotic means that everything can be taken as sign. For example, we can say seeing a black cat crossing the road indicates bad luck. But is there a proof that a black cat brings misfortune? Well, basically no. It's a cultural belief passed down to generations. The semiotics are formed by a dyadic model. When we say dyadic, it means an interaction between two things. The signified, which is the something, or the one who uses the signs. And we have the signifier, the one who perceives and infers the signified. If both elements are combined, together they form the sign or semiotics. Simply speaking, the signifier is the form which the sign takes, and the signified is the concept it represents. So for you to better understand it, we have an example here. So let's use the black cat crossing the road again. So as mentioned earlier, the signifier is the form which the sign takes. So what is the form of the sign here? So it's the black cat. And what is the concept it's trying to tell us? It's the misfortune or the bad luck it brings. So great, now you have an idea of what is the signifier and the signified. Art is changing over time because of the economic growth and changes we are experiencing. Each art has an aura on it. Aura signifies supernatural or magical force, very similar to mana. When an art has an aura, it means there is uniqueness and authenticity on it. But as mentioned earlier, because of the changes in our economy, art is slowly losing its aura. Authenticity cannot be reproduced, and art in the modern days has become reproducible. Therefore, art is losing its uniqueness over time. In the modern age, art has become liberated, thus losing its connection with tradition. This loss of tradition has also given advantage to showcase real-life situations to the viewers, readers, and listeners. Memes are the best example for this. Different traditional arts are used as memes and are posted in social media. These memes give emphasis on how a traditional art gives meaning or relation to events currently happening.
The well-known contemporary French philosopher Michel Foucault uses the word biopolitics to describe the attempt of the state to control humanity by the use of biopower. And take note, biopower is the power that these states have to control people over their lives. And in other words, biopower is the technology that control the entire population. And biopolitics is the style the state uses through biopower or by the use of biopower. As the year passed by, death and starvation become no longer an issue to society. It gives a state no choice but to find a way to control humanity again. The state wants to find a docile body for them to control and do what they want. From the beginning of the 18th century, the field of science becomes more progressive. Aside from that, the technology became more advanced that it basically gives the state the idea of how to control the humanity once again by using the human biology. As for the example, we are going to use biopolitics in the time of pandemic. The coronavirus 2019 pandemic made not just one country stop but the whole world. Citizens in each country were forced to stay at their respective homes and follow the health safety protocols. In the Philippines, the government implemented various community quarantines to prevent the virus. And just like in biopolitics, the government control over what people should do while the virus was still not in control. We are going to talk about necropolitics, but before that, we are going to play the game named The Boat is Sinking. And the players consist of a doctor, nurse, a policeman, a politician, and an unemployed man. However, the boat can only hold 4 persons, which means one person has to go. Who would it be? Who do you think would be thrown out? So, what is necropolitics? Cameroonian philosopher Joseph Akile Membe, or mostly known as Akile Membe, describes necropolitics as the judgment of whether whose life values and who's not valuable. Necro from the Greek word nekros means corpse, which represents the politics of death. In simple terms, it shows how the government values the people who have power and people who have not. It means that as long as you have money, the government will be on your side. However, if you don't have the means, expect to be discriminated from the people who have power or the people above you. As for the example, for sure a lot of you heard about the shootout case that happened in Interlock in December 2020. Few days before Christmas Day, a case involving a policeman and a mother and her child. The video of the incident was immediately uploaded on various social media platforms. Having different opinions, netizens who have watched the video reacted to the said case. And on the other hand, the death of a flight attendant in earlier January 2021 also became an issue. Who's to blame for her death? And I know you are confused. Why did I use this as an example? If you have followed these two cases, you will see how the police department of our country handled this.
Vita Activa. Hannah Arendt is a German-born American political philosopher. Her many books and articles have had a lasting influence on political theory and philosophy. Arendt is widely considered one of the most important political thinkers of the 20th century. Arendt sees the world as a realm of freedom with the world of labor and mere of satisfaction of needs. Democracy is the only defense against the threat of totalitarianism for the sake of the citizens. Arendt introduces the term vita activa, which means active life, by distinguishing it from vita contemplativa, contemplative life. And there are 3 fundamental activities, which is the labor, work, and actions. Labor is to sustain human life. Labor is the biological process of human. It is the human activity directed at meeting biological necessities for self-preservation and the reproduction of the species. Because these needs cannot be satisfied once and for all, labor never really reaches an end. Labor are quickly consumed and more must be always produced. It is a work that I need to go through difficulties for us to survive. And labor make us alive, for it is one of the things that sustain all of our needs. There is no instant thing in this world, so we must work hard to achieve it all. Next is work. Unlike labor, it has a clearly defined beginning and end. It leaves behind a durable object such as a tool rather than an object or consumption. These durable objects became part of the world we live in. Work is a process which the raw materials will make into a product. It is to build and maintain fit for human use. Work makes our artificial world of things. Work only focuses in things or materialistic type of person. This only values material things than spiritual existence. Action means that humans disclose themselves to others. Action is the mean by which we distinguish ourselves from others as unique and unexchangeable beings. With humans, unlike with other beings, there is not just a generic question of what we are, but of who each is individually. And we take action for us to be introduced into the world, that we must also interact ourselves to others, and we must not isolate ourselves from the people around us. Vita Activa in Philippine culture. Filipinos are hardworking. Yes, we all know that. Filipinos will always find a way for them to survive. They always find ways for the sake of their family. The Filipino creativity and resourcefulness at work shine through, which help them work harder than anyone else. Some of the work here in the Philippines came from raw material, and Filipinos are knowledgeable. They disclose themselves to others. Despite having a lot on their plate, you will see the Filipinos offer a hand to their colleagues in the project. Luis Alcazar. He was a Marxist and by default a communist. Alcazar lived during and experienced the Second World War. The Cold War, lots of African countries fighting for and obtaining political independence from their colonizers, the Vietnam War, American civil rights movement, and so on. Alcazar became a Marxist because I think he see the chaos in the world that resulted from greed and corruption, in which it is the product of capitalism. Ideologic state apparatuses. Ideology is a system of ideas or ways of thinking. It is the group of ideas shared in a group of people having with the same culture or religion or specific type of belief system. Ideology state apparatuses is the institution that achieve the interpolation or oppression of people in soft underlying measure. These include religion, education, media, culture, and so on. So, their institution, part, ideology, which keeps capitalism in place or make people think it's the right in a way, in a low-key way. The example of ideology state apparatus is the media in the Philippines. Media has an important function in imposing its thoughts into public by pretending as if it is independent power. Media binds society to sovereign power by will rather than pressure. Repression state apparatus. This results to violence and force to achieve certain outcomes. Because the truth is up to oppression or conditioning at some point. When the ideology state apparatus fail, the repression state apparatus would like to do a certain outcome. It includes courts, the army, the police, and so on. This talks about the laws in which we must follow. The repression state apparatus exists to reproduce the relations or means of production to maintain the inequality that is needed for capitalism to think, but it doesn't pay with mind like the ideological state apparatus do. It uses force to punish resistance. The example of the repression state apparatus in Philippine pop culture is the armed forces of the Philippines. Being the protector of the people plays a crucial role in preserving peace and harmony by defending country against terrorism and other forms of threats, whether of civilian or military.
What is simulacra? Simulacrum is a representation or imitation of a person or thing. The word was first recorded in the English language in the late 16th century, used to describe a representation, such as a statue or a painting, especially of a god. Simulacra in Philippine pop culture. Simulacra and Simulation is a 1981 philosophical treatise by sociologist Jean Baudrillard, in which the author seeks to examine the relationships between reality, symbols, and society, in particular the significations and symbolism of culture and media involved in constructing an understanding of shared existence. What is pastiche? A pastiche is a work of visual art, literature, theater, or music that imitates the style or character of a work of one or more other artists. Unlike parody, pastiche celebrates rather than mocks the work it imitates. What is pastiche in 18th century in words? An artistic work in a style that imitates that of another work, artist of period. The operetta is a pastiche of 18th century style. The song amount to much more than blatant plus pastiche, an artistic work consisting of a medley of pieces taken from various sources. What is pastiche in Philippine pop culture? The word pastiche in a French cognate of the Italian noun pasticcio, which is the plate of pie filling mixed from diverse ingredients. Metaphorically, pastiche and pasticcio describe works that are rather composed by several authors, or that cooperate stylistic elements of other artists' work. Pastiche is an example of eclecticism in art.
What is kitsch? The American essayist Clement Greenberg describes kitsch as the art that is associated with the proletariat, who is under the social class of wage earners, and compared to avant-garde, kitsch appeared as the consumable art for uneducated workers. As for the general mass becoming the audience of kitsch, the government uses it to their advantage and control the mass. Avant-garde is the art that is in the abstract complex, and the specialized or the professional eye can only interpret the meaning of it. Mostly, artists who create avant-garde create for the sake of creating. They no longer create to please the audience. They're like, I don't care if you don't understand my work. I do my work, that's it. And as for the kitsch, it is the art that appears to be popular rather than being high class. The reason it becomes more popular is because the audience and consumer came from the proletariat class. So based on Clement, like, he described proletariat class as an uneducated people who don't understand art. Like, they will just see the artwork and they will just, wow, they're beautiful and like that. As for the example, kitsch in the Philippines. When you walk to the street of Manila and nearby provinces, there's no doubt that you will not notice this artwork on every wall. Like on the right side of the slide, it just shows how Filipinos are good when it comes to art. From the jeepneys and the bus, who has the variety of styles and designs that shows the creative sides of Filipinos.
Every day, Desertos centers on the idea that ordinary people are not merely passive and submissive consumers, but active and can manipulate the environments around them through everyday actions. Desertwa divides society into two groups, the producers of culture and the users. He maintains that users can manipulate these mechanisms and conform to them only in order to evade them. Deserta is interested in the operations and actions of people used every day to resist the ruling structures and powers. The majority of people, when dealing with life, are not weak. They tend to fight back and be also defiant about the problems they would face. Society has two classes, the high and the low. The high are the ones in charge of establishing such things that make them look above all, while the low handles and obeys the things people above them installed in their minds. The Sertua is certain to find out what can people do to injure the high class. When you look at your surroundings, you always see people using their phones, even if they are with their companions or families. So this example is a cafe with no Wi-Fi. It makes you spend a memorable time without technology or whatsoever, like taking a break from the cries of the reality.